name is Disha. I'm an archaeologist and I write regular columns for ThePrint on archaeology and all the issues regarding archaeology. 1947, the years that followed the independence, was a new era for not just in archaeology, but also in understanding the history of our newly formed country and also the history of a subcontinent and how the the present political boundaries of India really played a important role in furthering the overall historicity of the subcontinent. In all of this, there were many projects being initiated, where on one side there were projects like the exploration of Ghaggar Hakra, which was undertaken under the guidance of A. Ghosh. There were also projects like the Mahabharata project, which was initiated by Professor B.B. Lal. His first excavation under this project was at Hastinapur, and following the excavation of Hastinapur, before that he spent a year exploring the region which coincided with the epic of Mahabharata, and he pointed out many sites which either resemble or either have the same names. The places still retain the original names, or the archaeology was very similar. After his exploration and excavations, now which were not limited to only Hastinapur, but also to Tilipat, Panipat, various other sites, including the Purana Killa excavation, he concluded that all these sites have a common denominator, which is the painted Grayware. And this particular painted Grayware during that particular time in 1940s, 50s, 60s was a new archaeological culture, which was not known earlier, or even if it was known earlier, it was not given a definitive name. So this particular culture was quite unique this pottery was unique in terms of its pyrotechnology, in terms of its surface treatment, and I have done an elaborate column and also video column on this. So if you are interested in knowing a little bit more about PGW, you can find the link in the description box below. And apart from PGW, he mentioned that all of these sites, the geographical location of these sites are very similar to that in the epic. So for him, he mentioned in his early writings, especially in ancient India 10 and 11, that this was a geographical exploration, and these findings were circumstantial evidence, which means that PGW was found at all of these sites, and therefore, being the earliest culture in most of these sites, it was. And also looking at the date of the culture, where the chronology of this particular culture and where it falls in the overall stratigraphy of northern India, the archaeological stratigraphy of northern India, all of these evidence sort of fell into place, and PGW then became in sync in time and space with the Mahabharata. When Professor Lal was presenting his early findings, his contemporaries such as A. Ghosh, Sankalia, all of them were quite interested and intrigued by the findings, but they also suggested that Professor Lal be a little cautious and not take all of these findings as the absolute truths. In one go, because they said there are pitfalls to these early assertions as well. But for over 7 decades, the theory of Lal's with PGW and Mahabharata stood the test of time. There were no alternative theory until recently, and even the recent theory is still not as well tested as Lal's. So, whatever, it seems that the idea which was put forward, the hypothesis which were put forward by Professor Lal really is stuck for a really long period of time. And after his exploration of Mahabharata in 1975, when he left his post, he took an early retirement from the post of Director General of ASI, and he moved to Jivaji University as a professor. As a HOD, because at part of his survey, he was also intrigued by the Ramayana. So he's also undertaken surveys in various sites like Ayodhya, Chitrakoot, and other settlements which were linked to the epic of Ramayana. He decided to take up the project called Archaeology of the Ramayana sites in 1975. The project was inaugurated at Ayodhya by the then Minister of Culture, Professor S. Nurul Hassan. He excavated Ayodhya. This excavation started from 1975, and it went on till mid 80s. And the excavation parallelly was starting at Sringverpur as well, and 5 sites which were mentioned in the project of Ramayana, the Archaeology of Ramayana project. In all of this, just like the archaeology of the Mahabharata, or he called it the historicity of Mahabharata, he tried to look at the archaeological evidence. Now, archaeology is, unlike history, is a very different stream, and it becomes even more different, and quite, the limitations become more when you have the text to it. A lot of people say if you have a text supporting archaeology, things become easy, but more or less what we see is you need to really work hard to find the common ground as well between the text and the archaeology, which is why there have been so much of tussle, even with the Buddhist archaeology as well, and with other historical and later historical medieval archaeology. There is a lot of tug of war which goes on between the archaeologist and the historian. And the reason is because there's rarely a common ground. For instance, the archaeologists of India are always, fighting with not fighting, but they are in disagreement with the archaeologists working in Nepal about where the Kapila Vastu is. So there are various such instances where there is no common ground or agreement, even if there are historical text available which could help. So archaeology generally is a study of cultural material. It is the study of objects like, like the potsherd, which are found at various sites. So for you it is just a normal looking pottery, right? But if you give this particular potsherd to an archaeologist, they will be able to tell you the time period of this particular potsherd. They'll be able to tell you how this pottery was made and how it was manufactured. And also, after scientific analysis, if there is any residue or anything available, they will also be able to tell you whether it was used for cooking or storage of any liquid, etc. So even the work of an archaeologist today has expanded because of the inclusion of science and other technology, being a multidisciplinary subject as archaeology has really diversified. But when it comes to the epics, here we have to be a little careful. It was Sankalia who mentioned that, when dealing with the epics, because he himself has written extensively on the Ramayana, he was an extraordinary, one of the important figures in Indian archaeology, was also a scholar of Sanskrit literature. So he has also written on Ramayana and its archaeology, and was a contemporary to Professor Lal. He said that there is something called a text-based archaeology, and there is archaeology-based text. So we need to sort of find there's a difference between the two. So he pushed forth for archaeology-based text approach instead of text-based archaeology, because archaeology, the findings that you are the evidence that you're reading on text, you may not find the exact evidence on ground. You may find something else, and you have to sort of squeeze information from what you get. So it's not an easy task when we're dealing with the epics and we dealing with the archaeology. So when Professor Lal was working in in this project, he found NPW at almost all the sites, like he found PGW in the case of Mahabharata. His initial assertion was that just like PGW was is linked to Mahabharata, is in time and synced to is synced in time and space to Mahabharata, NPW is synced in time and space to Ramayana. But once he declared that, he was in sort of a pickle, because NPW is sort of he succeeds PGW even at the core of the epicenter of painted Grayware culture. there are a few sites where NPPW is sort of contemporary, and even if it's contemporary, it's little at the later phase. And there are no sites even today which precedes, or NPPW sites which precedes even earlier to about 1100 BCE. So absolutely exception of Joffrey, which is 1200. There are no sites with NPP which are a little earlier. And so, which meant that if PGW is linked to Mahabharata and NPPW is linked to Ramayana, Ramayana becomes a later occurrence and Mahabharata early, which sort of didn't go well with, which doesn't fit well with the texts. So here was a problem with archaeology and the text, the first problem in itself. So initially his idea was not to find, when he was excavating Ayodhya, was to find the archaeology of Ayodhya, to see how the city sort of expanded, what is a cultural material, and very early on, even during the explorations, it was noted that Ayodhya and other sites, these are the multicultural sites, and this is the occurrence in entire. If you go to UP and find sites in UP and Bihar, you will mostly find sites which are multicultural, sites which are occupied for thousands of years without any break. The archaeology culture changes, but the people sort of continue thriving and living. There is a constant stress on that particular area, the population stress, and people are living in that. So there is a change in culture, but people are always have occupied that area. And there are sites like Ayodhya where there is still modern population as well. So you have sites like Mathura, Kashi, Ayodhya, Dwarka, where there is still modern day population, and then the continuation of a city or a town have really never has not stopped. There is a continuous cultural change and also continuity that you see at these ancient towns and cities. So very early on, it was known that Ayodhya is one of those sites. And the earliest culture which Professor Lal found at Ayodhya was NPW. Initially, it was not the idea of having to validate the epics. The idea was not that. The idea was to find what is the archaeology of the Ramayana sites. And that's what the term really means. It's very important to actually see the title of the project. It was the Archaeology of the Ramayana sites, not the historicity of Ramayana or validation of Ramayana or archaeology of Ramayana. It was archaeology of the Ramayana sites, which means the sites which still have the connection or can be put or can be connected to the epic or the narratives of the epic. And what is the archaeology trying to tell us? That was the initial idea, and that was a very archaeologically sane idea to put forth, because that's all we can do as an archaeologist. We can only find the archaeological traces of these important towns. And I say important because these are the settlements which have continued to thrive irrespective of any external factors for thousands and thousands of years. So they can literally tell you about changes that have happened in the lives of the people who have lived, and not in the broader narrative, which is for millions of our for Indians, it's considered as they're very sacred and they're very close, and these are they have gone into creating the belief system of millions and millions of Indians. So the idea was not that, and that was appreciated by a lot of scholars in the initial time period during that particular time period, and that would have been a much more sane sort of an idea. But what we see today in recent years is a politicization of archaeology, the use of archaeology as a tool to validate one's belief, which according to me is not the right approach to take. And this is not a just a phenomenon which we find in India. It's sort of becoming a global phenomenon. So, there are a lot of limitations to archaeology, and archaeology alone cannot be an answer to all the questions which have been put forth, especially when it comes to the epics. And it should not be used as a political tool either. So in this week's column, you can read my extensive column on this very topic. I'm basically talking about the limitations of archaeology and how there are a lot of loose ends to this very a very the topic of archaeology and the epic. There are a lot of loose ends, and there is a need to have a disciplinary approach. There's a need to have collaboration and cooperation between archaeologists, historians, linguistics, etc., and to actually excavate these sites horizontally and not to depend on the vertical diggings alone. In the end, archaeology can really cannot validate your belief. It cannot validate anything which, as many Indians believe, is an inheritance, the epics. But what it can tell you is that it can sort of weave a thread to the past. It can tell you a very different facets of your past which are not there in the text. It can help and tell you about social, economic, political structure of the people who were living in this time. So people are also important. They are the ones who've left these antiquities for us to sort of reconstruct their story. And their story is even more important in my belief. And that is what should be the aim of archaeology. I will end this with the hope that, this week's column is sort of taken in the right spirit and taken as an a dialogue on the limitations of archaeology and all the issues related to it. So thank you so much for watching. And for more such interesting topics on history, archaeology, culture, please follow ThePrint. And happy festivities and happy Diwali to all of you. Thank you so much.